Okay, welcome everybody to this Relevance Researchers event. This month we are pleased to welcome Andersen to talk to us. She's a researcher and PhD candidate at Federal University of Paraná, I'm not sure if I said that right, in Brazil. I'm sure she'll say it properly for us in a moment. She holds an MBA in strategic marketing and has spent a good part of her career developing marketing projects for corporations, including the Coca-Cola Company, Henkel and Gillette do Brasil. She is currently involved in 2 projects in linguistics and 1 project comparing interventions targeting collective action against climate change. Her main project involves research on misinformation, applying relevance theory, and that's what she's going to be talking to us about today. Her talk is entitled The Relevance of Misinformation on Social Media, a study of the fake news phenomenon within the relevance theory framework. And on that note, I shall pass it over to Angelica.
Thank you, Kate. I'm going to share my screen now. Hope it works properly. Yes. So, good afternoon. I'm Angelica Andersen from Universidade Federal do Paraná in Brazil. I'm very honored to be here today. Thank you all for your presence and attention. This presentation is based on the research I developed on my master's dissertation, which I'm continuing now on my PhD. I don't bring answers, but rather hypotheses and areas that need further research by pragmaticians. Well, I hold an education in linguistics and in strategic marketing, and I have spent part of my career working for corporations, developing systems to increase production and consumption. With the advent of fast internet and social media, I have witnessed great changes in the global economy, and I've seen how we have become the product. Well, that's why I decided to study some communicative phenomena that have emerged due to the polluted information ecosystem within our current hyperactive economy. So today I will talk about my research on information disorders using relevance theory. I will furnish you an overview of why the subject matter is an important concerning issue and why pragmatics offers a powerful framework to study it. This presentation is divided in the following sections. Well, we have an introduction with some context and definitions, state-of-the-art and research on information disorders, some discussions, a few conclusions, and references. Well, information disorders take advantage of concerning issues that are on the media's focus. For example, at the moment, the invasion of Ukraine, and this unspeakable war is in the front page of every newspaper. Well, here we see a woman carrying a banner that reads, "We wish Zelensky were Bolsonaro." And the caption next to it reads, "Ukrainian woman raises banner at demonstration in Poland and asks for a Bolsonaro for president," while here some are trying to take him out and even trying to kill him. Well, the original picture was manipulated to influence opinion to favor Bolsonaro, who is currently the president of Brazil. So no matter how awful or criminal or outrageous a situation is, there's always someone trying to take advantage of it. Let's talk about the dark side of social media. In 1969, ARPANET, internet ancestor, went online. It sent 2 words from one computer to another and then crashed. Only 53 years later, in 2022, we live in a hyper-connected world in real time. In 2012, people spent an average of 90 minutes a day on social media. 6 years later, that number jumped by 61% to 145 minutes a day. So this raises at least 4 major concerns. Transformations are occurring faster than they can be researched. There's a high degree of mutation. People are forced to readapt to novel technologies all the time. These changes are so drastic and frequent that their implications cannot be predicted. And these changes are happening with no regulation over these huge social media corporations. Well, online environments offer adaptive choice architectures that is nudging to maximize commercial interests to capture and keep our attention, to monetize our data, and to predict and influence our behavior. Well, in 2021, over 4.2 billion people worldwide were using social media. That is over 53% of the entire global population. Well, many people are getting their news from social media. So in 2020, British population declared that 39% of them are getting their news from social media. And in Bulgaria and Greece, this number goes to 71%. So nowadays, sophisticated editing and publishing technology has been made so accessible and cheap that almost anyone can create and distribute content. And this may lead to various information disorders that can create a misleading view of the world. Well, we live in a coalition between social media algorithms, advertising systems, and people who are prepared to fabricate content for profit. And this poses a critical threat to democracy. Emotionally involving content sharing is what drives social media. And that's why information disorders take advantage of pieces which are surreal, bizarre, surprising, and controversial. And these aspects make them more likely to go viral than accurate content. Well, the report Industrializes Information 2020 that was published by the University of Oxford in 2021 has identified 81 countries where disinformation campaigns have become professionalized and are produced in an industrial scale. Well, from 2009 to 2020, over $60 million was spent hiring firms to provide manipulation campaigns. And from January 2019 to November 2020, Facebook and Twitter have removed over 317,000 accounts and pages from their websites. But this has had very little impact tackling information disorders. Well, in terms of definitions, there is no consensus among scholars and journalists regarding the best terminology for the different aspects of the polluted information ecosystem. The expression fake news includes actual news that don't deserve any attention, weaponized speech that is designed to support some ideas over others, and information that is designed to sow doubt and increase mistrust in institutions. So this dual scheme where we have true on one side and fake on the other is not capable of reflecting the gradation, the nuances, and when truth is decontextualized. Well, three other expressions have been employed to describe information disorders. Nevertheless, the exact meaning also differs from one study to another. So I have adopted the definitions that have been developed by Wado and Hossein in 2017 from Harvard University. So, according to them, misinformation refers to unintentional mistakes. It's not created or disseminated to inflict harm. And that includes inaccuracy and when satire is taken seriously. Disinformation refers to false information that is deliberately created or disseminated to harm a person, a social group, an organization, or a country, whereas malinformation refers to information that is based on reality, but it is manipulated. It can have the date or the place changed, and it is used to inflict harm. And that includes revenge porn, hate speech, and harassment. Well, however, we face many problems when we try to apply these definitions to tackle information disorders, especially using automatic detection. So should we focus on content or on intention? And how can we do that effectively? So from a pragmatic perspective, raw data and the state of affairs in the world refers to natural information. Once it surfaces human interaction, we assign meaning because we make correlations between our internal states and the external stimuli. And then we translate that into language, which becomes non-natural information. However, truth can be expressed literally, but also figuratively. So in the case of metaphor, irony, and other tropes, the literal content is false, but it is information. It is created that way intentionally, and it is not misleading. Whereas in information disorders, the content might be literally accurate, but implies false implicatures because it is misleading. So the terminology we have nowadays is not capable of capturing the essence of information disorders, which is to influence our cognitive environment towards a misleading view of the world. Well, so how pervasive, how ubiquitous information disorders really are? Well, according to an influential study by Rousseaugi et al., disinformation is 70% more likely to spread than accurate content on Twitter. Negative emotions attract people's attentions, and one of the main reasons why people share content is novelty. However, some researchers disagree that information disorders are a concerning and prevalent issue, and they ground this assertion on a study that declares that only 14.2% of Americans' daily media consumption is news. And from that number, only 0.15% refers to disinformation. But first, we don't have similar studies in other parts of the world. Most studies are conducted in the United States. Second, we don't really have access to what people see on social media. We have a partial access to their engagement, that is when you click on a link to follow it. And also, this study, just like many others, employs reductionist definitions that were primarily developed by social media corporations. So according to them, disinformation only refers to outright lies. They don't include misleading content and hyper-partisan content. Well, on the other hand, a study by Rogers 2020 evaluated the ratio of Facebook users' engagement with misinformation to mainstream news. So in 2016, 1 in every 4 sources were fake. 4 years later, in 2020, 1 in every 3.5 sources were fake. That means the mitigating actions that have been taken by social media corporations have not properly worked so far. So why applying pragmatics to study information disorders? Terminology is vague and ambiguous. Information disorders are heavily context-dependent and time-dependent. The performative aspect of how people use social networks is very critical to understand how information disorders spread. Relevance theory is a linguistics theory that is based on cognitive psychology, and it's able to elucidate information processing and human influence. I have evaluated over 300 journal articles on information disorders, and I have identified studies in most areas of knowledge, most psychology, journalism and communication, and some in linguistics, especially due to automatic detection. I have also identified the main theories that have been applied to study information disorders, and I have grouped them together according to the areas of knowledge where they are mostly employed. So most of them are from psychology, general psychology, reality and truth, economic psychology, bias theories, some from computer sciences, and that are employed both in linguistics and psychology. There is the argumentative theory of reasoning and information manipulation theory. I have identified only one article on information disorders using relevance theory. Well, I have also identified the main trends on research on information disorders. So the first trend refers to an overview that includes history, manuals, data reporting, and definitions. The second trend refers to studies that evaluate susceptibility and risk factors. The third trend studies on personal effects and social consequences. Then we have on detection, especially automatic detection, and studies on how to tackle information disorders. Well, so how can a piece of information disorder achieve optimal relevance? Attention represents a cognitive bottleneck because it limits our perception in stimulating environments. So when we process information, we have a limited amount of attention and a limited amount of memorized data that can be made available at a certain point. And that's why we maximize relevance in efficient and predictable ways. So we process information and only until our effort is worth it. And then we stop when our expectations of relevance are met. And to do so, we take the easiest possible route to achieve an interpretation that is capable of generating the effects that seem appropriate to us. So information disorders are designed to explore this search for relevance, inducing the audience to infer the most accessible hypothesis. Well, all available information on the audience is used to yield relevance. And so the utterances are adapted to the way the target audience is going to process them. Because interpretation is not a rational reconstruction process, but is rather guided by presumptions of relevance. When we infer meaning, we employ our context, which is a psychological construct, a subset of our assumptions about the world. So we employ these assumptions to infer meaning rather than the actual state of affairs in the world. So information disorders, they are relevant when they somehow interact with our existing assumptions about the world to produce conclusions that matter to us from this process, which is combining the new inputs with our existing suppositions. Well, three strategies might be employed to infer meaning from information disorders, and that is from relevance theory. So people employ a naive optimism strategy when the source is trustworthy or reputable, or when the content is already aligned with their beliefs. When people employ a cautious optimism strategy, they are capable of avoiding some obvious falsehoods, but they will fall for well-designed pieces that are fabricated according to their biases and relevance expectations. Only by applying sophisticated understanding, people are capable of spotting all kinds of information disorders, which is achieved by improving critical thinking through education. So what about epistemic vigilance filtering information disorders? Well, epistemic vigilance mechanisms are responsible for protecting our human database of beliefs about the world. So they pose an obstacle for the successful spreading of information disorders. Most researchers agree that humans might not be gullible, but might be resistant to new ideas. So one hypothesis is that the cognitive mechanisms that are responsible for handling information, they have appropriately worked in small groups, but they have inadequately adapted to our contemporary large-scale complex societies, particularly because of the velocity of technological changes. Another hypothesis is that epistemic vigilance mechanisms are weakly activated in some circumstances because we are allocating our cognitive effort to other tasks, and we only strongly activate them when we detect the risk of deception. Well, here we have an example of misleadingness in a piece of information disorder. In October 24 last year, Brazilian President Jair Bolsonaro made a pronouncement that was transmitted both in Facebook and YouTube, where he claimed that official reports from the United Kingdom suggest that people who are fully vaccinated against COVID-19 are developing acquired immune deficiency syndrome, AIDS, much faster than expected. I recommend you read the story. Well, this assertion was strongly rejected by scientists and medical experts, but many people in Brazil still believe that COVID-19 vaccines might cause AIDS. YouTube and Facebook have taken down this video. However, as a consequence, truth in all vaccines has decreased and polarization on every subject related to COVID-19 has increased. Well, the Brazilian National Immunization Program was created in 1973, and it's a world reference, providing all main vaccines free of charge. Brazil is one of the few countries in the world that provides a comprehensive list of immunobiologicals to all residents. The vaccination card is a requirement for enrolling children in school. But we are at the risk of seeing eradicated diseases such as polio and measles become a public health problem again when the country's leader makes such declarations. Well, in this case, epistemic vigilance mechanisms might have been poorly activated because the assertions come from a trusted source who himself referred to another trusted source. Bolsonaro uses ostension by making his statement on an official broadcast, which is afterwards replicated by official media. He uses simple language, so there is little processing effort, and it yields relevance because it affects most people. His claims are offered in such a way that induces the inference of the most accessible hypothesis. That is, if you get vaccinated against COVID-19, you might get AIDS. It also explores several human biases, such as negative bias, confirmation bias, conservatism bias, and bandwagon effect. Well, critical thinking would reveal that no valid argument was presented in this declaration, but that requires sophisticated understanding or further processing costs. But what about reputation loss as a result of misleadingness? Well, a piece of information disorder might be a complete falsehood, and that occurs at the explicit level of communication, and it involves truth conditionals. But it also might occur in a misleading piece, and that occurs at the level of implicatures. And that might be by influencing the interpretation process at different stages of the pragmatic enrichment, disambiguation, or by supplying an inarticulate constituent or constructing an ad hoc concept. In the case of misleadingness, the fabricator might deny responsibility because the addressee is also responsible for the derived implicatures. Well, some studies, especially on the area of information disorders, refer that there is some reputation loss when people forward disinformation, but they are not conclusive, and we still need much further study on this area to understand more about reputation costs. What about polarization as a result to exposure to information disorders? Well, people share information disorders because sometimes they believe in it. But sometimes people know it is false and they share it anyway because they want to strengthen a point of view. Well, piling up justifications reinforces people's views and increases like-minded polarization groups, especially on social media where we have several echo chambers. Well, the accumulation of arguments on the same side leads people to polarization, because epistemic vigilance mechanisms might not be triggered when people are presented with information that is already aligned with their previous beliefs. And because beliefs are not inert, having more arguments or prior convictions might drive people towards more extreme versions of the same views. Well, another example of misleading is in a piece of information disorder circulated in a British newspaper, the Daily Star, in March 26 last year. What we see here is the original headline that has been changed since then, and it reads, "Coronavirus fears 5G Wi-Fi networks could be acting as accelerator for disease." The sub-headline reads, exclusive, skeptics of the ultra-fast network being rolled out across the UK claim 5G might be exacerbating COVID-19 and could explain why it has spread rapidly in Britain. Well, what happened here? The official news picked up a 5G conspiracy theory that mutated, taking advantage of the fear inspired by the COVID-19 pandemic. Short time later, YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter were flooded with similar claims. Well, the shifting landscape and lack of scientific consensus during the early stages of the coronavirus pandemic created an information vacuum that sucked in conspiracy theories and false health advice. Well, as a consequence, several 5G masts were burned across the UK. Well, again, epistemic vigilance mechanisms might have been poorly activated because it is a trusted source. It is a news outlet. It also explores the mutual environment of regular readers who appreciate scandals and tabloid media. In the last few years, official news outlets have been suffering revenue losses because fewer people are willing to pay for quality news. Furthermore, journalists rely on social media trends to write their articles. So eventually they pick up information disorders and reproduce it. But then other times they use misleading clickbait headlines to attract more readers. Well, the headline here yields relevance because most people use Wi-Fi networks, and most of them don't really understand how this technology works. The headline induces the inference of the most accessible hypothesis, which is 5G masts are causing COVID-19 across the UK. Well, it also explores several human biases. Yet, when people read the entire headline, employing sophisticated understanding, they notice it is misleading because the subheadline claims that reads that these claims come from people who already are skeptic of the 5G networks. But most people don't read the entire article, and some don't even read the subheadline. Well, besides that, Iran, which was one of the countries that had the earliest outbreaks of COVID-19, doesn't even have this technology yet. Well, in some future work analysis, well, we face the risk of generalized information mistrust that could lead to a cynical society and prevent cooperation and development. Well, some researchers evaluate that developing critical thinking is capable of raising epistemic vigilance because it then allows a greater degree of open-mindedness. It enables people to accept information from unknown sources based on evidence, based on reasons, and then exclude sources that are not proper. But we still have many questions about epistemic vigilance, how exactly it works, what triggers it, how can people better filter information. Well, another very important studies evaluate long-term effects on encyclopedic memory. Particularly Ange and Lewandowski have been studying the continued influence effect on memory. That is, when people are exposed to the same piece of information disorder several times, it might affect their long-term memory, but we need further studies also in this area. What about truth and accuracy in relevance? Well, some linguists like Lewis and Grice, they believed language use is guided by conventions of truthness, reinforcing trust among interlocutors. Relevance theory, on the other hand, proposes that language use is guided by expectations of relevance, and then truth is a byproduct of relevance. Well, our human cognition is a reflective system. So we might be aware that some of our beliefs are false. So we are not guided towards contextual effects per se. but to contributions to our cognitive objectives. So yes, listeners do expect to receive true content, but especially on social media, there is an endless supply of true information that's not worth our attention. Our actual expectations are towards relevant information. Besides that, truth can be expressed in a literal, vague, and figurative way. So according to Wilson and Sperber, 2012, linguistically encoded meaning is far too schematic and fragmentary to be capable of being true or false. It is just an input to further processing. So when information disorders contribute to new information or facilitate updating old information within the system, it then provides positive cognitive effects, regardless of the proposition being accurate or inaccurate. And that's why I maintain that information accuracy is not a condition for relevance. So what about accuracy and relevance on social media? Well, people are motivated to acquire and share accurate information. And why is that? Because of good reputation, social desirability bias, to avoid social punishment, and for altruism. However, the social media environment distracts people from accuracy because the whole architecture of social media leads people to care more deeply about personal, social, economic, and political goals and values than about the accuracy of the information they decide to share. So in social media, people are more interested in acquiring, pleasing followers and friends, signaling group membership, seeking social acceptance, seeking entertainment, or promoting political interests than sharing accurate content. Well, thank you all for your attention. If you'd like to contact me to hear more about my research or get a copy of my dissertation, which is in English, you can do. I have here some references, and I'm now available for questions. I hope you're not too hard on me because I have just started my PhD.
Thank you very much. Give a round of applause. I see Billy's clapping and some hands going. So let's open the floor to any questions. You can put them in the chat. You can unmic and speak. You can put your hand up. Whatever is easiest. Give people a second to formulate their questions or comments or observations. Oh, is there something in the chat? Oh, that's a round of applause in the chat. Okay, well, while people are thinking, I will start with my own question. I wonder whether you've thought about this phenomenon of fake news. It's talked about a lot, but what about the kind of similar phenomena that happened kind of in pre-digital times? So I'm thinking about that like there were scandals in the UK. There was a vaccinations cause autism type scandal, which I was reminded of by your example, and I believe that was quite localized just to the UK and didn't necessarily spread around the world. And I wonder if you'd looked at how kind of disinformation has spread in pre-digital communication, or indeed I was also reminded of just maybe gossip, like kind of people just gossiping and sharing news, stories that are kind of usually scandalous and may or may not be true, and whether there's any parallels there, or is that something you've looked at or you want to look at, or I don't know. It's a very open question.
Well, thank you, Kate. Yes, everyone studying information disorder has a look at that because this has always happened. It's part of history. If you take the Second World War and you talk about propaganda, it has always been there. And gossip is an important part of communication, of interaction, of society. It is considered even positive. The issue now is because we are connected in real time with the whole world. this can be weaponized, when it was, our aunts talking, then it goes here and there, and it's mouth to mouth, and then it can be discredited afterwards. But now we have so much, and some people really got the hold of understand how to use it in a successful way, to change opinions. So there are many studies evaluating how much of, elections results have really been influenced by this kind of false information. So it has become a problem once we are so hyper-connected, and it is getting kind of out of control somehow. So I don't know if I went to the point.
The scale that you're on.
The biggest problem it is scale, yeah.
And the kind of global national implications rather than the kind of local personal implications that you might get from
because
neighbor.
People get confused, because you are online all the time. Then you have, you're part of several social media. Then all of a sudden you read this, and then you don't have time to read so much about a subject. And then several people start saying the same thing. You start, well, is it true? And then you don't have time to check everything. So sometimes you might believe in something that you don't know so much more about. And because people are doing that professionally, particularly the University of Oxford has been evaluating this professionally. Firms that are created and they are hiring people to produce it. Then there is a whole other story, because I have been working in marketing. I have worked in agencies that produce advertising. And one thing is you producing advertising, which sometimes already is very, manipulative in a negative sense. And then you take this to information, it's a whole other story, because you're using several tools to influence, to convince people of things that are not true. And exactly, because there is so much, you cannot check everything. And then that is the problem. Some people, they just don't trust anything then, because there's so much false that I'm not going to trust anything. And that is a problem, because we can also not trust everything. Because how can we cooperate if we don't trust people? So the scale, the magnitude, the tools, that has become a huge problem.
I just wonder if there's something to be said around the epistemic vigilance mechanisms and the kind of ease of sharing this. So it's very easy to just click retweet before you've really thought about something or processed it or kind of assessed the evidence. Whereas perhaps pre-digitally it took more effort to spread information, and so perhaps you're more likely to reflect on it, and there's lots of stories about reputations on social media being damaged very quickly because people make rash decisions. So I wonder if there's something around the kind of affordances of social media and the kind of ease with which you can spread this information and epistemic vigilance. I don't really know, I'm just thinking.
Well, much criticism on social media corporations is justified, because you see, the objective of a corporation is profit. Let's not fool ourselves. To get profit, the company uses everything available to do so. And some of the criticism is exactly on the sense, emotional content gets more shares, gets more likes. So, for example, in your Facebook account, you say, why don't I ever see anything from this person and this person that is my friend? Because you're always getting feeds from people who are putting out there things that already got a lot of interaction, and it's always involving. And then you read, you see, but this is, another bullshit. It's not interesting. So you keep getting this. So yes, the algorithms, they have, part of this to blame, and because the whole architecture is, directed to this. It would be wonderful, if your feeds only in your feeds only appear things that are really interesting, that teach you nice things. But it's so rare that, because you always get these that get a lot of interaction, and they get interaction because they are these unimportant emotional things.
I'm gonna say one more thing before I pass over to Rio, and that's I think there's definitely work to be done around. It may seem fairly trivial, but about using relevance theory to explain in a systematic way why emotional content gets more reaction, and why there's that negative bias in terms of the likelihood that something will lead to cognitive effects. I think it's worth I mean, I know, I've been working in clickbait, so I think, and there's a lot of people working on similar things. I think as a kind of collective, it's worth us kind of taking a step back and saying, like, can we understand why that type of content is shared more readily and spreads more readily? Anyway, I'll shut up at that point and hand over to Ryoko. You've got your hand up.
Yeah, thanks. It was very, very interesting, Angelica. And kind of Kate covered that with her last remark, and I don't know if it is going to be a question or comment from me, but can we look at your last slide again, and where you are talking about people are motivated for accurate information, and so that very last slide.
Is a little slow to share. It's not.
Looking at.
No, let me see why it didn't share. Let me try again. Okay, can you see that?
No, doesn't matter. Doesn't matter.
It's not sharing for some reason.
How people are motivated to, what was again the accurate information? Yeah, here, go ahead, share accurate information, but the bottom, so yeah, that one. But people are motivated to acquire, share accurate information, but the same time, they think about more personal, social, economic, and so on. So I think there seems to be this sort of, not conflict per se, but there are different dynamics. On the one hand, we want gain information, we want to achieve. There's a communicative matter. At the same time, there's a lot more social aspect of the communication rather than simply cognitive. And as Kate mentioned earlier, we seem to be gravitated towards sharing emotional content and so on, and that's probably maybe linked to a more social side. And just wondered, what's your view, or how you'd envisage relevance theory could help us explain how these, not conflicting, but two different but interlinked aspects would work? I hope I made sense there.
Yeah, I'm thinking a little bit about how the best way to explain that too. Well, I'm still doing my research, so I have been struggling with some things, because I am at this point of my research where I started to having to evaluate truth, which is not exactly, it's like a pre-relevance theory. But particularly where I see that there is a lot of good work to be done is evaluating, to try to show to people what aspects and what is the route that a piece of information disorder takes to become relevant. So if people can see that, and that involves, of course, sophisticated understanding, we take that into pieces so you can better see, exactly what aspects, how it is constructed, how the cognitive aspect, of communication is so important, to achieve relevance. And then obviously epistemic vigilance, it is the area where there is much more to be done. And it has been done because, when I started studying this, there were very few articles that were really interested in dealing with epistemic vigilance. And now some labs, some researchers are actually using labs to test this. And so much more information, much more knowledge on the area is being developed because, for example, I don't have a lab. I don't have money in my university to do this kind of research. So I rely on some colleagues. And I have been exchanging some information with particularly Gordon Pennycock from MIT. And, I'm hoping to get, to do more work together so I can go further in this area. I know it is maybe not the answer you'd like to have because the truth is much of it I still don't know. I know I envision some perspectives, but there's a lot of work to be done.
Yeah, I agree because I'm also looking at some of the sort of online activities and communication that kind of goes often beyond what we used to look at. And there are a lot of more social aspects. Communication is not just about communication anymore. It's more about building up community or, as you mentioned here, pleasing followers and friends and so on. So I find it very, very interesting to see how relevance theory could contribute to account for these matters. But yeah, thank you.
So the next question was in the chat from Katia. Is there any tool to defend ourselves against misleading and false information?
Well, many people working in the area have been, producing manuals with a step-by-step, ways for you to identify this. Well, some of the very important issues studies are working on how to raise epistemic vigilance. They're proposing, for example, in schools, having more time working with students to raise critical thinking. Well, some other important thing is some important work has been going on identifying misleadingness, in fact-checking. However, fact-checking poses another problem. When it started, I don't know if you remember, people, the companies, they were always taking the false story and then putting the truth behind. And some studies have evaluated that this actually helps spread information disorder. So the last year, more or less, most of them stopped doing that. So also fact-checking can dump fire, but mostly, you can defend yourself by education, by, learning how to evaluate the source. Is it a trustworthy source? Evaluate language, how it's written, because then you can spot misleadingness, like in this example that I showed you. If you read the subheadline, it is already there. So it is a little bit of reading training in terms of source, in terms of content.
Thank you. Agnieszka, you've got your hand up.
me just unmute. Okay, thanks so much, Angelica. I was actually going to ask a different question, but I changed my mind now, and I will just follow up on what you said. That I have a class on rhetoric and communication with my university students, and this is precisely what I do. So we actually use the relevance theoretic tools to to discuss their methodology, of course, but also like to practically raise awareness. And I have observed that it was much of a revelation to my students to see that lying is not only about saying something which is false, and that there are those misleading or deceiving by an implicature, and how many ways that false information can be conveyed implicitly. So I think that was really, very, very enlightening for them. So I can just say, I fully agree. And thanks.
Well, I just on a follow-up thing, I have a few wonderful articles in this area. So if you'd like to contact me afterwards, I would love to share them with you, because I was delighted to see the work that some professors and researchers have been doing this. And I think it's one of the best ways to, tackle this issue. So remember to write to me, or I'll write to you.
Yeah, I will. Thanks.
I would also like your bibliography. That would be really useful. I mean, Billy.
Hi, just lower my hand. Thanks very much, Angelica. I mean, I think this is really great work, and it's really great to see ideas from relevance theory being applied in such a complicated area. I want to ask about sophisticated, and it's partly just to see if I'm understanding properly, because when I first came across the ideas of naive and cautious optimism and sophisticated inference, I was understanding it as you need to get to sophisticated inference in order to be like a human. Like we're all sophisticated inferentialists. We're not born sophisticated. So as we develop, we get to be sophisticated. People vary. So autistic people are different degrees, and they're a continuum and so on. But would you say I'm understanding right that a lot of this is about how we can be more or less sophisticated, and how different stimuli can lead us to be more or less sophisticated, and how an individual can be more or less sophisticated depending on their context? Am I understanding that right? And is future research partly going to be about developing that? Like what makes me less sophisticated now than I was when I was looking at that other thing, and so on?
Yeah, I agree on how you understand the concept of sophisticated, because, it is in a general way, yes, that's how I see that as well. But the way it has been applied by some colleagues working on information disorders, they took a different view, because it is completely correct the way you see that. But the way people are working with this, maybe due to even terminology, to facilitate studying the subject matter, the way people are dividing this is that some people, the way they deal with new information, they rely too much on sources and previous knowledge. What these colleagues that are, doing research, actually, taking numbers and evaluating how people infer meaning, they have spotted that some people rely too much on this. So, for example, if I am a Democrat, everything that comes from Democrats, it is valid. I don't filter too much because I am Democrat. The same if I am Republican. I'm mentioning this because so much study is conducted in the United States. So, and also regarding, content. if I'm already, very conventional, I'm not very open. So every time a novelty comes, I'm a little skeptical. This is more in this sense that it is divided. And when we say that we are trying to improve this is, trying to teach people that no, source doesn't always means that you should accept it, and also content. You should continuously question, this is what researchers do actually. We are always, am I right? Should I change this? You propose something and a few years later you say, it was not really that. And this way of thinking that we have in research is what we should help people in general develop. So it's more in this sense. I don't know if I was clear enough.
That's really, really clear. Can I ask another question if nobody else got that hand up? So just related to that, I think one of the thoughts I have is it a mistake to talk about being not sophisticated enough or too sophisticated? Because doesn't it depend on exactly, when I first came across some of this thinking that led to the epistemic vigilance stuff, it was about how humans make logical errors because it's rational to do that. So we don't want to, every time somebody says something, go, yes, but it might not be true, I'd better check, So it's because we've developed our shortcuts and heuristics that in some contexts, it's rational just to take it that that's probably roughly right, and you carry on. It's only in some contexts where you have to think, they've reduced the price of this, have they? I wonder how much it was a week ago. Maybe they put it up before they brought it down. But if somebody says something to you in everyday conversation, it's not that rational to think, she's saying she's tired. I wonder if she really is. Let me think about it. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah. So, one of the best works in this area, I have to say that it is from Sperber and Mercier. It is I'm trying, to digest everything that they produce, but because, when they evaluate that humans are not gullible, they are thinking very much on the larger picture, because we don't have so much energy. We cannot employ so much effort on every single everyday thing. So we have to maximize everything. So these shortcuts, they make the whole sense. If this has, I am a white person from this. So this whole thing that involves the kind of person I am, has worked for my mother, my group, all these subgroups. So I have to take these shortcuts because they work for the kind of person I am. So it is not irrational. The problem we are seeing now in this particular subject matter is because we can take all these shortcuts, but now we live in this kind of society where we have so much information. You have to be here, and then there are 3,000, emails, and then WhatsApp, and then you have to answer, and you have to deal with this whole thing. And because some people are doing this, professionally, how can you organize this in a way that works for you? When can you take shortcuts? So some training on how to do, and some researchers that have been doing amazing job, trying to figure out exactly epistemic vigilance. They're raising so many questions, and that's some of the questions I'm bringing here, because we really don't know how exactly this works and exactly how we can improve. So we really do need much more research. Again, I don't know if it was good enough, because I have so many questions myself.
I think we're all really looking forward to reading your PhD next.
Thanks.
Yeah, and the best research asks as many questions as it answers. I say that to almost you. Last question, Fabrizio.
Hi, I just wanted to say, great job, Angelica. And I would like to add another layer of complexity to your PhD, because we know that we're living in a globalized world, and that English is being used as a lingua franca in the world of news in particular. And I don't know whether it's part of your PhD proposal, or it could be a future avenue for research, for relevance theoretic research. But it'd be interesting to look at how information spreads multiculturally and multilinguistically. So, you know, everywhere in the world, news are being spread in English. Obviously, inferentially speaking, foreigners, non-English speakers, don't have the same inferential abilities as native speakers. And I believe you have this, you know, it's hard for them to go down the right path, inferential paths. And sometimes this news being spread, you know, in a biased way, and it's being collected or understood in the wrong way. So it'd be interesting to see what happens when you have translators and interpreters that pick up this news, perhaps populist news, and spread it in the wrong way, and you know, and it's misunderstood and in a multicultural environment. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned something really interesting, because the pandemic was perfect to evaluate this aspect, because in the beginning we knew nothing, and then when the first articles, research articles appeared, they're all in English, and then someone takes a part of it and uses that. So in Brazil, for example, Brazil is a really huge country. So it's not like small countries where people really need to learn a second language. So many people really do speak English or have a basic level, but a level to read a journal article, and we saw that, news outlets mentioning an article, and we could if you go there and read the article, you could see that they didn't really understand what the article was saying. They were saying something wrong, really. And then somebody else, took a piece of that article, and then it went on and becomes information disorder. So it was a great moment to see how you can use manipulation when people are not capable of communicating in lingua franca, like English. So yes, but again, so much more needs to be done. So I would be really happy, if I could encounter other colleagues to work a little bit with me, or, discuss further. So really do contact me. I would love that.
Thank you.
Thank you. So we'll round things off there. I don't disappear because I've got a couple of things to say, but let's give Angelica another virtual round of applause. Yes, lots of clapping in their squares, which is what we like to see. So thank you very much. I'm just going to briefly share my screen to show you what's coming up. And also, Angelica, if you can send me your PowerPoint and or your bibliography, then I can put that up on our website, because I think a lot of people are really interested in your sources. If it's all in the PowerPoint, then maybe I can just share that, as long as you're happy with that. Oh, screen sharing has failed. I think I talked too much. Let me try that again. Otherwise, I'll just have to describe it to you. No, it's not letting me share my screen. So I will tell you instead, you can visit the website yourself. So next month, the 27th of April, we have our very own Ryoko leading a session. She's going to be presenting her work on a not unrelated topic, live commentary, engagement and entertainment towards a relevance-based analysis of sharing, viewed behaviour and dual communicative situations. So as I understand it, that's kind of second screening where you're watching a TV show and tweeting your reactions. I've been doing that a lot lately. So that'll be really interesting. Our May meeting, we're not holding a meeting in May because our regular slot last Wednesday of the month coincides with the EPICS 10 conference in Seville, which I know at least some of you will be at. I'm very excited. So hopefully we'll be meeting in person or at least meeting virtually to talk about pragmatics at that conference instead in that month. So we thought we'd just put that on hold. And then in June, we're going to hear from Stephen Jones. Give us a wave. Title to be confirmed. We'll be nagging you for that soon. Just send it through whenever you're ready. Further details on our website, and if you scroll up the chat, I added the link there, relevanceresearchers.com. So thank you all for your attendance. Thank you again, Angelica, for your presentation. We'll close the session here and hope to see you all again very soon.
Thank you all. See you next month, hopefully.
Thank you. Bye-bye.